Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webcast today on the ever-changing world of HR technology. I'm Terri Joosten, Global Vice President with HR Strategies Consulting. Been in the HR space now for just over 20 years, spent a large amount of time around the technology, worked for a number of years at HR.com, reviewing, analyzing, and writing about the technology and what's happening on the space. Did a series of webcasts there called Reality HR, where I interviewed senior HR executives and understood where their pain points were and what major accomplishments they were achieving in HR. And together that's founded me a really great basis for understanding the space, both from an HR and a technology perspective. So I'm really happy today to be here with you and to share with you some of the knowledge that I've gathered through this journey that I've had in HR around talent management, what's happening in the marketplace, and hopefully I will be able to instill some wisdom to you to help you make wiser and better decisions around what you're doing in your HR journey and your HR transformation when it comes to technology. Today we're going to focus on specifically the trends in HR, determining what talent management is, what drives talent management, why these types of projects have failed, and things that you can avoid to do to make sure yours are successful. Again, further information on what's happening in the marketplace, really talking about the difference between integrated and best-of-breed solutions, looking at the advantages of each out there on the marketplace. So we're going to kick-start it off, speaking specifically about what human capital management is. At any point in time, if you do have any questions, you can ask those up in the chat box. If you mouse over the More button, you'll see a chat there, and we'll try to get to those. If not during the presentation, certainly at the end of the presentation. Human capital management has been an overused term probably for decades now. What it means to everybody is different. The same happens often around the verbiage of talent management as well, and HRIS and HRMS. So it can be confusing out on the marketplace if you're newer to the space as to what it is and what people are specifically talking about. In the context of today's presentation, we're classifying human capital management as the management of all of your people from a life cycle perspective, from starting to end of life cycle, whether that's they're terminated or they retire from your organization. Although now there's a lot of organizations that are going beyond retirement and keeping up and collaborating and bringing back employees post-retirement as well. So the longevity of your lifespan may be different depending on what type of organization you are working in or have worked in the past. I like to break out human capital management into core areas, starting with your core HR and payroll solutions. So these are kind of the backbone and what I classify often as the one-time investment that you get a return on investment in HR. Those are the products and solutions that you take a lot of things that you're doing manually and automate them to create a one-time benefit to your organization and to start your journey maybe a little bit on employee self-service. Next is probably benefits. They're so important now out on the marketplace. There's a lot of focus around those, doing global benefits, and of course, should you be in the U.S., doing your open enrollment plans there. And making sure that everybody has ease of use and visibility into benefits because they are costly from us as an organization providing them. And there are great ways, obviously, to manage benefits, to attract candidates, to retain candidates, but also to manage benefits to reduce the overall cost in your organization of benefits by being able to administer benefits in a much better way than you potentially have in the past through manual processes or through systems that aren't effective. Workforce planning is another area that is really growing in focus. A lot of focus more so on larger organizations. but I was just talking to a prospect the other day with only 300 employees that does some pretty sophisticated workforce planning scenarios where they're really looking at what they're doing from a growth and perspective and planning those out, understanding the risks and building strategies around that. Then we get into a suite of products that I classify as talent management, and they involve anything that happens typically at hire or afterwards. So we have our recruiting solutions, our onboarding solution, performance and goals, succession planning and career development, your training or learning management systems, your compensation solutions or incentive management, your labor relations, total rewards, wellness, and then I have grievance, but it could be applied to labor relations as well. And then, of course, your health and safety applications, and of course, wrapped deeply with workforce analytics. So analytics and reporting should be part and parcel to each of the individual products, but some of the vendors out in the marketplace do have advanced and predictive analytics, which includes benchmarking as a standalone product. So that's how I encompass and view human capital management in the light of both divisions, departments, although you'll see OD and other areas and departments that may come up, but how they apply to actual technology. So what we want to talk about next is the changes that we're seeing out on the marketplace. You know, what was traditional talent management, and where are we going now with talent management? And what we're seeing is a continuation. This has been happening for some time, and again, depends on where you are in your HR transformation journey. But traditional HR is very reactive. So somebody comes to us with a problem that they're needing to address, and then we go and we take an action and are very reactive. What we're seeing, and part of the reason for a buy in technology, is about being able to free up time by automating a lot of processes so that we can be much more proactive. This leads us right into our next point around administrative. So a lot of times HR in the past and still today in the organization is viewed often as a cost center and just an administrative function and not strategic in the organization. And certainly that's what we want to change, and that's why we're engaging with technology to free up time to be more strategic. HR used to also be considered something that was confined just to being the responsibility of the HR staff. And again, now HR is something that all of us are responsible for in the organization. A lot of limelight has been on the whole Me Too and what's happening out there with sexual misconduct and that. And we have to realize that everybody is responsible for towing the line as far as what you need to do from a, quote, HR perspective. Next on here is transactional. So in the past, it was all about, you know, processing paper, and now it's really about being much more collaborative in the organization, be a part of teams' decisions, helping people be more collaborative as well in the overall organization. HR was called on at certain times when things were wrong or things need to be addressed. And where we see HR should be now is being available and being part of everything all the time, everywhere. It used to be HR was considered a red mark on the bottom line of any financial sheet. You know, there was not a lot of benefits, but now we're seeing that HR is really playing a role in delivering and proving that they can actually impact business results by improving performance and engagement. In the past, we were talking about adding paperwork. Now we're wanting to add value. In the past, we were about counting heads, and now we're making sure that the heads that we hire count in the organization. We already talked about the downplay on the bottom line. We want to impact it positively now. We went through a real trend where sourcing HR was really prominent because we weren't playing a really important role in the organization. And now we're seeing it be the other way around, where HR teams are being built out because they are mission critical and a core competency of an organization for their continued success. Other types of trends that we're seeing, overall, or a differentiation around a local focus on HR to a global mindset. So a lot of people think that, oh, well, we only operate in this particular state, or just in North America, so we don't really have to have a global mindset. But actually we do, depending on whether your product or service or the organization you're working with, if they do business or if their customers come from outside of the area that you produce product or services, deliver services in, we need to rethink HR and make it more a global mindset to map with what we're doing from a business perspective. This is obviously what I would classify as a no-brainer, although a lot of people in their HR transformation are still about automation and not about transformation yet. But when you're looking at technology, and that's the focus today of this conversation, we want to look a lot more at just automating. We want to look further and see about how, when we do automate and get things out of Excel and out of Word documents and filing cabinets and into an electronic format in one central place in a system where we can report on it, we want to know what we can do with that data and information beyond there to really transform not only what we're doing in HR, but what we're doing in our organization. There's also been a big influx on the change from people buying standalone applications to buying integrated suites. And again, that's the core focus of the conversation today, is to really talk about why that is, and we're going to dive into that a lot deeper, and hopefully you'll understand the value of that as we continue through our journey here over the next 45 minutes or so. The next thing is the difference between wanting just reports to really looking for analytics and predictive decision support information out of these systems and solutions. So we don't want just the rear view mirror reporting of what happened. We want to know about how, if we make changes, it's going to impact what we're trying to accomplish moving forward. So talent management is more important now than ever, and there's been a greater emphasis and demand on talent management or human capital management out on the marketplace. And part of the reasons for that aren't just internal, and we're going to go through why they are internally on the next slide, but they're also happening externally. What we're finding as organizations, so if you are in that SMB space, small to mid-sized business space, and you're fast growing and you think maybe you're going to IPO or you're going to get bought or acquired, the statistics out here from McKinsey say that organizations are performing basically 22% better on shareholder value if they have great talent management practices out there on the marketplace. So as a result, people in your organization are putting more and more emphasis, to your senior managers, your boards of directors, investors in your company are really looking at what you're doing in HR because they can see directly how that's going to impact the value of the organization. And this is truly what we want to do in HR, is have that type of role in these types of organizations. If we look at this more specifically as to why it's important to us from an HR perspective, some of these I hope aren't new to you. Maybe a couple of them will be slightly different. But obviously, we need to attract top performers. Our businesses can't be as successful as they are unless we have the right people in the right positions in our organization. So we want to make sure that we're attracting people, and we're finding out now that wages alone is not the #1 contributing factor to finding these employees. In fact, the ability for advancements in career and your investment in training is becoming parallel to their decision process as to who they want to work with. And typically, A players have the capability to pick and choose what companies they want to go for. So if you want to attract the best people in your specific industry, we're going to want to make sure that we're able to demonstrate to them that we have their back as far as investing in them and providing them training. Obviously, culture is also super important, especially to the millennium generation, and that's a lot of where our hiring is coming from now and for the perceivable future. So we want to make sure we have a culture that maps to the type of people we want to have in our organization and to the types of people we need to be successful in our organization. There's a lot of emphasis and focus now put around green. So those are some of the key trends that we're seeing. So not only do we want to attract the right people, obviously once we have them on board, which can be a cumbersome task and an expensive onboarding process, we don't want to lose those top performers. We want to continually improve the satisfaction of our employees. One of the things we're seeing more and more common out on the marketplace is what we call the use of employee promoter scores. Businesses use them. They're called net promoter scores when we use them for our customers to rate how well they think we're doing in servicing them. We now see a lot of organizations building surveys that they do weekly or monthly just to gauge or do a pulse on how well their employees are enjoying their time and tenure with their organization, and if they would recommend us as employers to their peers to give us an idea of how we're doing around employee satisfaction. Obviously, part of retention is about keeping employees engaged. And obviously, engagement is a whole focus of implementing technology so that we can keep them engaged and get more out of them to drive those business results that we talked about. So that led us obviously right into engagement. So we want to not only improve engagement on an individual level, we also want to improve it on a departmental, a team level, a location level, on a global level, so that we can meet and drive business goals. And we want to also be able to prove and show through analytics that HR is adding that type of value. So it's not appropriate enough now to go out and say we need technology because we need technology. We need to be able to know what success looks like. We need to be able to define success. And then inevitably, we need to be able to provide the analytics that shows that the time and effort we put into implementing this solution is providing the return on investment that we purchased the products and solutions for. We also want to make sure that we're instilling best practices and improving on what we're doing in HR. We want to make sure that we're not only just freeing up time for us in HR, but we're also performing functions in a much better fashion that alleviates effort for everybody involved in the organization. So we all have more time to focus on what is important to driving business outcomes and enabling us to be more strategic and effective out on the marketplace. Which leads us into strategic and HR. So really, you know, we talked about it on the previous slides as well. HR really needs to move from a point of automation into becoming strategic. So we don't want to be just transactional where we're processing paperwork and events. We want to be able to really critically impact the success of our organizations and be able to show this through what the return on investment are for products and solutions that we need to empower us to do more for the organization to drive the results both in HR and for the business. So we're going to jump quickly and go into the top 10 reasons HR projects fail. And a lot of people ask me why I bring this up, especially so early in a project, because I think it's important if we're going to spend time and effort and invest in looking at technology. It's an exhausting task, can be out there in the marketplace, although the web has made it certainly easier. And we are finding that between 70 and 80% of the work and effort in determining who you think your best partner is done before you even pick up the phone and engage with those partners out in the marketplace. But if we're going to invest all this time and effort and look at these projects, we want to make sure we're doing what we can to eliminate projects from failing. So we need to do that due diligence. We need to really understand what's happening not only in our own organizations, you know, defining and documenting and coming up with our own process information, but we want to go out on the marketplace and do proper due diligence. So if you're not going to invest the time, don't buy the technology. The other thing is we want to make sure what we're doing is we're not just automating old processes. So I have an acronym here is OP plus NT equals EOP. What that means is we don't want to take old processes, add new technology, and come up with expensive old processes. What we need to do is get a lot more out of the solution than we put into the solution from a process perspective. Oftentimes, too, the reasons projects fail is the system is too difficult to use. So we want to keep this in mind when we're looking at and buying solutions. You know, is it easy and intuitive to use? Are we using multiple systems and having people log in and out repeatedly? Because if we are, that's going to probably cause a point of failure because they have to remember passwords. They have to remember how to use and function in different systems. Which leads us to the next point is often if we're not going down the integrated path, we end up with too many systems and too many incomplete processes, and then as a result, we get less adoption and we have to do a lot more training in getting these systems to be effective. The other reason projects fail is we haven't built proper change management around them. We haven't thought about the impact not just to HR but to the business, how to communicate it, how to roll it out, how to get buy-in. These are important aspects in making sure that these projects are successful. The other thing is we don't have a lot of time. We can't take time out of everybody in their jobs and daily functions to repeatedly train them on how to use these systems. So we need to make sure we're doing training effectively and we're buying solutions that are intuitive, which just reduces the amount of training that is required. The other thing is we need to understand what success is, and we need to be able to make sure we're going to be able to get the data we need to show that we have a return on investment for these systems. If we don't know what success looks like, we're never going to know whether we achieve success. If we don't know how to measure it, we're never going to be able to show how we got a return on investment. One of the biggest things, and probably one of the things I should have put right up front, is if you don't have executive buy-in, do not bother again to waste your time going through this process, because in the end, they could kibosh it. In fact, I had a phone call just the other day about a customer who said, when we asked, you know, whether we were going to be selected or not for them as a vendor, they had said at the last minute their executives had decided that they were going to build their own HRS technology rather than go to market and buy it. Well, this was months and months of work from HR perspective to build an RFP, to get them where they need to be, to start communicating and getting everybody excited about the potential of this technology, to be set back by executives to decide that they're going to build their own technology. God forbid. I mean, I can't even imagine what this executive was thinking. But anyways, they made that decision. So then that whole decision and the impact it makes to the organization when you've already gone through so much of this process is devastating. So find out if you have executive buy-in and make sure that you're not going to be shocked like that organization was. The next thing is, you know, it's part of change management again, is every manager needs to know what's in it for me, that acronym YFM. So if we're not communicating effectively, if we're not engaging our management team, if they're not understanding that implementing an HR solution is going to provide value to them and why, they're not going to buy into the solution. And as a result, your adoption will be impacted, and so will your return on investment. The other reason HR projects fail is everybody is just too short-sighted. They're too anxious to solve the pain point, and they have no long-term vision. They haven't mapped out their needs past their immediate needs effectively, that they buy a solution that doesn't fit their long-term vision, or they buy in silos because they don't talk to the rest of the HR organization. So maybe you run off and buy individual products. So let's talk about that as a scenario and show you what I mean by that. So in this example here, very common, one of the first products bought are usually an applicant tracking system or a learning management system. So, you know, we have a high growth rate, we're hiring like crazy, we're doing everything manually, so we decide we need an applicant tracking solution. We have just too many resumes, we have no database, no reporting, no real career site, everything's manual, it's just not cutting the bill. So we do everything we think we should do. We go on the web, we do research, we do an RFI, we do an RFP, we think about present and future needs, and we go out and we buy the best system. So we think we've done everything right, and probably a lot of you are saying, okay, that seems to make sense. But again, what you haven't thought about are what I call golden metrics and golden analytics. You haven't looked far enough in your organization to really think about what happens outside of recruitment. So in this example, here are what we call our silver analytics. So great, now we're going to have analytics. We're going to know our time to hire, our cost per hire. But how do we get what we call golden analytics, which are like your quality of hire, your new hire retention rates, your hiring management satisfaction? If your recruiting is not integrated with your performance and other solutions that you have, you're never going to truly know how effective you're doing in recruiting. So what happens there is what we call, you know, a partial solution or a point solution methodology. So you bought recruiting and you've hired somebody, and that's great, but now how do you get that employee into your payroll system, into your HRS, into your learning management system? So you've gone down this path, you think you're really successful, but quickly you find out here that you've dead-ended yourself in so many ways because you're not integrated with all the other solutions you have, and everything is being duplicated. There's still a lot of manual work that has to be done by having a recruiting solution. So should you have gone out and bought just a recruiting solution? For some organizations, maybe, but for most, I would say probably not. You needed to do a deeper and more in-depth look at where you needed to be. You may still just roll out recruiting, but you need a larger line of sight to the rest of the modules that may be available to help solve some of the other problems that you're going to incur with where that data goes and getting those golden metrics. So let's talk now. You know, we're leading you down the path to hopefully see that you need to be thinking long term, and you need to have a mindset around buying a full suite of products, not just one-off solutions. So let's talk about those trends and what's happened out on the marketplace. So if you're like me and you've been in the HR space for a long period of time, what I always say, what goes around comes around, and I've seen this, and we're going to show you these cycles. So in the late 90s, all the big ERP vendors, and back then Oracle and PeopleSoft and JD were independent entities. Now they're all part of Oracle. SAP and Bond were other ERPs that were out there in the marketplace. They were all telling everybody, especially large organizations, that you need to do everything in one consolidated system. And what we had out there were a bunch of major players that were saying, no, you know, you need to buy best of breed. So I remember when I was at HR.com, I met the CEO of, at that time, the company was called RecruitSoft. They changed their name to Taleo, and now they're actually owned by Oracle. I remember that CEO saying to me, Terry, says, you know why we're going to dominate this applicant tracking space is because that's all we're going to do is applicant tracking and nothing else but applicant tracking. And what we found 6 or 7 years into them being a very successful applicant tracking solution, that what happened was Taleo went out and started to buy performance management solution, other recruiting solutions and performance solutions and a learning solution and a compensation solution, because everybody was finding out that all their data was being dead-ended and they needed it to be in other solutions, and they were moving away from point solutions to buy an integrated suite. So Recruitsoft/Taleo started the transition to buy a bunch of companies to be able to be an integrated suite. And then, of course, they ended up themselves being bought up by Oracle. So let's talk about this, what's happening out there with acquisitions, because HR, I would have to say there's more mergers and acquisitions in HR than almost any other marketplace that I've seen. So besides Oracle buying up Taleo, there's been a number of acquisitions over the last decade noteworthy of mentioning here. SAP bought SuccessFactors, just before Oracle bought up Taleo. IBM also bought Connexa up. So those were the three biggest players on integrated talent management that got bought up by basically very large organizations, and a lot of them with big major ERP backgrounds. They did this because everybody wanted to move to the cloud, and these organizations could either have rebuilt their solutions to be in the clouds or buy the leaders. So they went out and bought the leaders on the marketplace. So what that means is that they're solid, and we know where those organizations are going to sit and rest. It's very unlikely that IBM and themselves or SAP or Oracle themselves will get bought up or get taken. So it takes a risk away from dealing with a couple of those vendors in particular. And it leads us to think a little bit about when we're starting to look at other players out on the marketplace who may be out there in the marketplace. Is there any risk associated with going outside of those big players in the fact that if they got bought out, that their products and services may no longer be supported by other organizations that may buy them out, or it may change who they are, how they operate as an organization or as a company. So those are some things to take into consideration when you're looking at different tiers of vendors out there, is making sure you're comfortable with the longevity that you may have with those solutions, not knowing where they may end up, because mergers and acquisitions are so frequent in that marketplace. So let's talk about what's happened since 2000 and the cycles that I'm talking about. So in 2000, in the dot-com boom, everything went from paper to the web. So we put resumes in the cloud, we put job postings in the cloud, we put performance in the cloud, we put compensation in the cloud. So as I say, we had .com everything. And then what we started to see was these mergers and acquisitions happen, like we talked about with Taleo. So they started eating up all these individual point solutions to build out these integrated suites that are out in the marketplace. So Connexa, SuccessFactors, and Taleo went from standalone recruiting, performance, and performance solutions or survey solutions to full integrated suites. And then, of course, in 2010, 2011, there was the very big acquisitions that we talked about with SAP buying SuccessFactors, Oracle buying Taleo, and IBM buying Connexa. And shortly after that happened, and what we're seeing still is the influx again now of these best-of-breed solutions like Fuel 50, Degree, Reflective. There's literally hundreds, probably actually thousands, I should say, of new point-in-time solutions coming out in the marketplace. And they're being focused on a change and a drive to be what we call employee-driven. So one of the things that I forgot to mention here in Web 2.0 is really what I think about when I think about Web 2.0. It's our drive as HR professionals to automate. So we led this purely out of our desire to take a lot of manual processes and be able to automate those to free up our time to be more strategic. We often led those under the guise of manager self-service and employee self-service to think that we were giving people more access to stuff that they wanted to do, when really we were just shifting the burden of the labor from us to them, and to remove duplicate entries and errors, But now what we're truly seeing are a move in an HR transformation journey to everything being done based on employee desires, employee engagement, employee needs, which is where all these new point solutions are coming out. So what we're seeing is a big shift in even the big vendors and how they're delivering technology so that everything can be initiated via the employee. So now the systems are being built and are geared to allow the employees to have an integrated engagement platform that engages the employees and is based on them taking actions themselves. So whether they put themselves on their own career path, whether they enroll themselves in training, whether they set up their own collaboration and team sites, it gives them the ability and the power to use these same HR systems to drive out value for themselves as individuals, to take ownership for their own responsibility and careers, which is truly a win also for HR at the same time it is for the individual employees. And what we're seeing now, the big changes and the pushes are the use of artificial intelligence and chatbots. So I'm knowing with SAP SuccessFactors, for instance, in their artificial intelligence and learning, is you take a training course and then it will automatically tell you other courses that are relevant to that. So that type of artificial intelligence of helping people understand if you like this, you may like that is happening. We're also integrating and using chatbots and sites like Slack and that and integrations, ability to talk to your mobile phone and say how many vacation days do I have through your application, be able to book your vacation. So we're really going to leveraging technology the way everybody wants to use and see technology to be able to allow employees to be able to adjust and use technology in the fashion that they're most acceptable. So this is really where we're seeing the big changes, and we're seeing some of these guys move here, and we're starting to see some new adopters come up here in this space, and this is where you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to really occur in 2020, and then start to see what's going to progress for 2030. So I'm hoping you found that useful. So, you know, we're leading to the fact now that really we want to buy integrated. So when we do buy integrated, there are options for your implementation. So you don't have to be paranoid and worried about the fact of how can I possibly roll out such a large amount of HR at one period of time. So the choices are, you can still go out and buy point solutions if you want to, but for the reasons we've dictated and are going to continue to dictate it, it's certainly not recommended. But you really should be buying integrated, and we're going to talk more in depth about what that means. But you do have options still to roll out everything at once or roll out modules over time. So you don't have to feel like you have to digest everything. Maybe you don't have the internal resources to tackle a project like that or the internal budget to do so. So there are options there. And how to decide what works best for you and your organization is really you understanding your own culture and your own change management requirements and needs within inside your organization to know whether it's better to roll everything out and deliver it at once or whether it's better to chunk it out. And it's also about, you know, where you need to and when you need to show the return on investment. Do you need to have small wins, or do you want to have a very large successful win at the end? And these are things you can take into consideration in deciding how you may want to go to market in consuming these integrated suites. So let's talk about what integrated means, because not everybody's clear on that. So integrated, you know, I'm going to read it here, means that software systems or applications can be made to speak to each other or pass defined data back and forth. So having integrations costs a lot of time, effort, and money. As one system may upgrade, another may not, and these connections can break. Although, to be quite frank, there's a methodology called APIs that allow one type of software system to talk to the other, and they have gotten a lot better, and it has made it easier, but there's still nothing that is better than having products that are, their integration is maintained by the vendor you buy them from, versus your IT department or you having to maintain them yourself. There's a tremendous cost associated with those types of integrations. Josh Bersin, if you don't know of him, he was bought up by Deloitte, so now it's Josh Bersin's by Deloitte. But he's a very influential and often copied and quoted entity out on the marketplace. And he talked about the fact that integration inevitably should be more important than functionality, although you don't have to give up functionality to have integrated as well, because it may not be there today, but if you choose the right partner, it will be shortly after in the system. So what they're saying is there's been a big flux of companies now leaning towards full suite solutions because of the importance of integration. So what we want to talk about more is the differences between ERPs and cloud and identifying these. So traditional on-premise ERPs are integrated, and they all have purchased cloud solutions, as we talked about. So what was the attraction for SAP, Oracle, and IBM to buy, Connexa, Taleo, and SuccessFactors? They needed a cloud go-forward strategy, and to get there by building from scratch would have taken so long, so they bought them. Because if you just want to use your traditional ERP, they lag behind on functionality. And most of these ERPs also have a sunset date where they themselves are going to become obsolete and not get functionality added to them. Also, the thing is with cloud services, you can buy on a licensing model. So smaller organizations are much easier to buy into being able to buy technology in the cloud, because you don't have to pay for the whole footprint of a big ERP system. You can buy cloud solutions based just on the number of users or employees that you have in your organization. Also, the problem with integrated talent vendors through acquisition are that there's real big delays in integration and possible multiple user interfaces. So you have to look at the maturity of who you're looking for out on the market and how many modules they may have in play, because if they have a lot of holes but they're filling them by doing acquisitions, they still may have a large time lag between everything works and functions properly and has the same user interface. So that's another thing to consider when determining who you want to partner with, is see how long they have had their products in their suite, because by then they all have the same user look and feel and they're well integrated together, and they also are well integrated inside each other. And what I mean by that is, for instance, when you're doing a development plan in career development, there's a direct interface with learning where you can say, okay, you need to prove your communications, and click the link, and it automatically opens up learning specific to communications versus having to log in and out of systems and be able to go find learning and assign it to them. And then once they've taken that learning in a truly integrated system, it will automatically update their skills and competencies to the level that's denoted by the course that they have taken. And that eliminates all that manual process that has to be done by either the manager, the employee, or HR. Obviously, the other thing is, because of cloud solutions, the ability for us to push out innovation is much easier. Applications push out innovation anywhere from quarterly to semi-annually to annually. So again, that's an important thing to take into consideration. If you want a vendor that's delivering innovation quickly, look at how often they're pushing innovation out, because if you have to wait a full year to get new features and functionality in a system, if you're an innovative organization, it's probably not going to be quick enough for you out there on the marketplace. This is again relating back to what they talked about, Josh Bersin talked about. So best of breeds are always perceived as the leaders because they have really unique features. But what Josh Bersin was telling us is that integrated providers will catch up and catch up quickly. So it's not always the best strategy to go with best of breed just because they may have a few unique features. You have to look much longer term around that. And I think this is the quote here that says, occasionally a niche vendor offers a valuable specialized feature not available in integrated framework, but basically it's saying they will catch up. So take that into heed. Don't rush out and buy a best of breed. Really think longer term. And then Cedar Creststone did a study also that helped you look at the value of buying integrated. So they show your operating income and growth, which goes back to having good talent management systems and processes impact your overall business performance. And this statistic shows clearly that you can perform better as an organization if you chose to have an integrated approach versus a best-of-breed approach. So what's the HR and business impact of integrated? So from our perspective, obviously we have one vendor to manage, which makes it much easier than having to deal with a number of different suppliers. We have one single sign-on, one way to access the system. It allows one user interface for ease of use for everybody involved. We have to do a lot less training because they don't have to learn how to navigate multiple solutions. We have a higher user adoption because they need to go into the solution much more regularly because they're doing way more functions in the system than just one-off solutions would. We have improved analytics. Those silver and gold metrics can be tied together. So not only do you have just recruiting metrics, but you have recruiting and performance metrics tied together, maybe recruiting performance and learning metrics tied together. So the depth of detail and the analytics you can get are much higher. There's less integrations, which means less downtime and less money, less reliance on IT, less frustration, and of course less cost associated with that. So not just the cost of integrations, but also what statistics show in the marketplace is if you're willing to buy multiple modules at once, you can negotiate a much better price than going off and buying one-off solutions. So the total cost of ownership for you will decrease dramatically based on you purchasing multiple modules at once. So one of my trains of thoughts here as we move into this slide is I can't stress enough, I need everybody to be thinking with the end in mind. So I want everybody to have a really long-term vision as to what you're trying to accomplish, not just in your department, not even just in HR, but even from an overall company perspective. We want to think about not always what's just best now, but what's going to be best long-term for us. So in order to do that, we have to collaborate between HR business units, so recruitment, organizational development, and training departments, compensation departments. We all need to talk to each other about what we're trying to accomplish and what our pain points are, and go to market and looking and buying a solution that helps everybody, not just individual departments. The other thing I can't stress enough is if you do invest in a solution, make sure you do the upgrades. So many companies that we're helping now get more value out of the solutions they bought. They bought solutions, even 10 years ago and never have changed anything since when they were launched and configured. Yet they're getting quarterly innovations delivered to them. So eventually somebody new comes in HR and says their system is not adequate, it's not up to industry standards. Where the supplier they have, regardless of who it is, assuming maybe you're choosing one of the three large or three mid-tier organizations, so besides obviously SAP, Oracle, and Connexa and / Workday come up in the tier 1 in the HR space, there's a whole sub-layer of other vendors that are mid-tier, Cornerstone, Ultimate Software, ADP, Ceridian, to name a few, and then you get a myriad of others like Silk Road, and I could go on and on forever around other solution vendors that are out there. But either any of those vendors or any of those ranges of products that you buy in, it's extremely important to keep up with what they're offering you new in the solution. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the same situation I see so many organizations, both small and large, do, which means that they have a product that hasn't kept up with the times and they're not getting best practices, and you start to see a drop-off in adoption, and you start to see that they're not really able to help you with your HR journey and transformation anymore because they just don't have the functionality and capabilities to do that. So keep up to date with your products if at all possible. I strongly suggest you pay for that type of support just to hold you accountable to do so. I know it seems crazy to pay to remind yourself to keep up to date, but it's important. Either way, it's important to always begin with the end in mind, and probably a lot of you have maybe seen this slide before, but apparently this actually happened. Major bridge being built, where obviously not a lot of communication and forward thinking was, and this is what happened in the end. And I don't want to see this happen to you and your organizations. I don't want you guys to go down the path and buy and procure HR software to throw it out because it doesn't meet your needs, or it has to have too many integrations, or it hasn't grown with your company. It's way easier to turn off functionality and eventually turn it on than it is to buy a product that doesn't have the functionality you need long-term in it, because nobody likes to go through implementing technology repeatedly. It's something that you should no longer have to do on a very frequent basis. There is absolutely no reason now that you can't choose a vendor and they can be the vendor that stays with your company for the duration of your company. In the past, we used to change HRIS technology every 7 years. And now you can change it quicker because it's easier to do so, but you actually should never have to change your vendor, as I talked about. And with the talent space, we used to flip them out because we'd have the flavor of the week, but now we're finding, again, with all of the HR suite, organizations have no plans to ever re-implement a new technology again. They're making the dedication, the effort to make sure they're choosing the best partner for them up front, so they don't have to go through this whole selection, RFP, RFI process that is in itself painful, but it's the whole implementation and the adoption and getting the return on investment over a long period of time, which is really cumbersome for organizations. So telling you to strongly take the time and effort you need to be successful, to choose the right partner, to be open-minded and long-term focused, because this is a lifelong decision. Maybe not for you, as you won't stay at your organization necessarily as a lifer anymore, like used to happen in the past, but it's important for you to do that as you know, part of your job and duty and function in the role that you're in with your organization. So that's the end today of what I was hoping to cover for everybody. I hope that you found some of that information of value. If anybody has any questions or wants to get a hold of me to find out further details or information, my email address is below. Happy to engage with you. Also, we will archive this presentation and send you copies of the slides should you want to have those. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic day, week, year, and all the success to you.